Have you ever noticed that with fear comes a lot of confusion? Have you ever noticed when you're under a lot of pressure, when you really need to be able to figure something out is when it's the most difficult? It just seems like when it rains, it pours, right? Like when you're under pressure, under duress, under stress, when something really matters to you, when the pressure seems to hit. We talk about people choking, right? Well, there's actually a physiological reason for that. That the fear comes from the sympathetic nervous system, and that much of these behaviors that we think are normal, a lot of these emotional experiences that we think are love related, or the feeling of abandonment and brokenness and not being able to live without someone, right? And we have all these love stories that describe this experience. Well, you see, the thing with fear that isn't really understood is that there's many different phenomena in psychology. Like one of them would be dissociation. Dissociation is this experience of disappearing to reality in heightened states of fear. And then there's many disorders that are dissociative in nature. Certain personality disorders, schizophrenia, for example, that have their origins in having elements of reality start to disappear from the awareness of an individual, where the imagination, contextualized by the fear, creates paranoid elements of hallucinations and delusions. And this creates a slippery slope where the person can continue to dissociate and then exist like my brother, who right now is chanting in the backyard. I told my mom I was going to try to help cure my brother in this lifetime, and I do believe I have the physiological basis for said cure. That said, fear is the enemy of consciousness, because not only does fear affect you emotionally and create avoidance and procrastination, it creates profound confusion. The confusion is caused because fear, as part of the animal fight or flight mechanism, invokes a reduction in consciousness to simplify the decision-making apparatus of animals, and it eliminates their awareness of everything outside the boundaries of whatever the fear is connected to, forcing an attachment. If you notice your dog when it's barking, it's very hard to get your dog's attention. The reason is your dog has a forced fixation upon something that it considered to be threatening. It entered into a fight or flight tunnel vision effect. And so fight or flight is the only thing the animal is enabled to do, simply because it loses its awareness as if it had a stroke. You see, the cerebral cortex is responsible for processing all of the sensory information from the environment. The sensory information from the environment is being processed all the time because your eyes have a nerve that goes into your brain, and then you have a cortex specifically for processing everything visually. And same with auditory. And so the brain is always processing reality, and it's not a voluntary process. You see, if you were in an emergency where you were watching a movie and a gunman came in and opened fire, you would automatically and involuntarily find the exit. You would leave things behind, your purse, your wallet, the popcorn, all the emotions that you're experiencing while watching that Ryan Reynolds movie, hoping to get your first kiss on that first date, would go right out the window. But how did you find the exit? The exit just showed up, right? Well, you see, your brain got segregated into two different conscious spaces where it processes the whole reality, and it has to see everything in the environment to eliminate things that are deemed unimportant for your survival. It saw the movie poster. It saw the other wallet on the ground. It saw the pattern of the carpet. It saw the cute couple that were matching. You see, it saw everything and determined the exit was the only thing that you needed to be aware of in the moment. And it eliminated your awareness of all those other elements so that you would have the best chance of survival. It's the very reason why, in a panic, a large group of people will trample one another because they lose observational awareness of anything other than the fence over there that they have all got to get to. And so the fight or flight mechanism evolved for a very specific reason. Because animals lacking the total cognitive abilities of humans, where we understand life and death, you don't need a fight or flight reaction to avoid walking around on the freeway, do you? No. But you see, a rabbit doesn't know it's alive and doesn't know it can die. And so it runs from fear. The rabbit does not know that mating produces babies, nor does it know eating is what nurtures its body. And so it doesn't have the cognitive abilities to navigate reality by understanding cause and effect. And so it responds to emotions, and its environment will stimulate instinctive behavioral responses that are pre-programmed. Like your dog urinating on a fire hydrant is almost an involuntary behavior. Or if it smells another dog in heat, it's going to be stimulated to go in that direction. If you throw something, your cat will chase it. And so animals have emotions that provide context to the external experience, and the fight or flight mechanism is organized such that fear takes top priority. And when an animal enters into fight or flight, its consciousness gets segregated involuntarily. A consciousness that would otherwise be fluid. Like in a non-fearful state, you could be sitting in a stadium and taking in the whole murmur, and you can move your consciousness around within the three-dimensional architecture of the internal rendition of reality, listening to a conversation over there, watching the game down there. But in an emergency state, that flexible consciousness becomes involuntarily collapsed around the source of fear. And so this mechanism is something that went haywire due to language. Language where words became powerful tools of discernment. Things that became symbolic representation of phenomenon that we would observe, where the genesis of knowledge was really about the formation of understandings that we would then describe in language and invent new words as new phenomenon became part of the architecture of one's awareness. And so some people would create new things like the Pythagorean theorem or Newtonian physics or Freudian psychology. And then if you noticed in the continuum of human knowledge, there are very few people that we would call pioneers. That there's so many people that might have learned calculus, very few people who pioneer it. And so in a world where some people can be creative and many people are stuck in a state of repetitive rhetorical fear and ego, where hierarchical thinking causes them to consume knowledge and assert authority with it, they would then, unable to relate to the people who create knowledge, burn someone at the stake for introducing a telescope. And anytime someone brings new knowledge into existence, the egos of everybody who have memorized the knowledge generated in the minds of the few people who pioneered their specific fields of study would then have to deal with something that violates their entitled position. They've got a PhD in psychology, so there's no chance that this guy, Nate, might have discovered something. And so we would disqualify someone simply based on the threat to my entitled social status as an expert. And that's the problem with knowledge today. Knowledge, absent any experiential component, and people educated specifically to confuse words with knowledge, words that they memorized over and over and over, repeating them to themselves just to take a multiple choice test or regurgitate that and then forget about it within a week. And psychologists need a desk reference because of how unreliable knowledge would be with no experiential basis for people that don't even know how to author it.